Item 5C, Roseville Electricity Utility Financial Update.
Okay, so Commissioners, I mentioned that there is a general information memorandum that was distributed today that you have a copy of, that the Secretary provided to you. And it explains some upcoming public outreach we're going to be doing with regard to our financial update, as well as some proposed rate restructurings that we're looking at. So this is the beginning of a multi-month process. So first of all, our financial health is strong. I've been mentioning that for a while. We, this year, will reach our minimum reserve levels for the first time in over 5 years. And that's because we, for the last 5 years, well, we had some substantial rate increases 6 or so years ago, but for the last 5 years, we've been budgeting based upon how much money we're bringing in, which I know sounds very simplistic.
What a
but,
novel approach.
We are only spending what we bring in, and we're not budgeting to spend any more, and that did happen in the past. So we stopped doing that about 5 years ago, and it's really paid off. In addition, the City Council and the PUC has recommended, and the City Council has approved, very small regular rate increases around the 2% range over the last 5 years or so, to just keep our costs and our revenues aligned. The thing that I mentioned on this slide is that zero net energy homes by 2020. Under state law, any new home built in after 2020 will be what they call zero net energy homes, which means that whatever it is they have, they won't need, at the end of the day, any additional forms of energy. That doesn't mean they won't use electricity from the utility, because sometimes, so when you have a solar systems on your roof, generally you're generating at a certain time of the day. If it's cloudy, you're not going to generate as much. And then you're going to need electricity at night. And so you're still using electricity from the utility, but net, the goal is to have all homes built after that time to be net zero energy. So what that's doing to our business model, as well as every other electric utility across the state, is it's changing our business. So we've been used to growing in energy use and growing revenues. Well, that's not happening anymore. We are on a trajectory. People are using less per capita. And in the state of California, the per capita use of electricity has dropped dramatically compared to the rest of the country. So since 2012, which was 3 years ago, our projected operating revenue continues to decline. We project our revenues out 10 years or more. And it's continuing to come in below what we're forecasting. And that's because people are using less electricity. And that's because of all of the initiatives. We have that business. Our business is to get people to use less of what we sell them. I think the only other business that might be trying to do that right now is the water utility. But anyway, so it's an unusual business model in that we try to get people to use less of what we sell them. But in addition, the state has passed many, many laws that are getting people to use less energy. So Title 24 is one of the state rules that guide what builders can build in homes. And Title 24 regulations are very, very strict about energy use, and they continue to really reduce the amount of electricity people are going to use, again, going to the zero net energy home. At the same time as our operating revenues are continuing to decline and our people are using less electricity, our costs are coming down, and that's because electricity and natural gas prices are down from what we thought they were going to be. And actually, renewable energy costs, while they're coming in higher than gas generation, it's still lower than we had thought they were going to be a few years ago. And our capital spending is down because we've changed the way we plan for capital projects. We actually have tried to become much more conservative and better forecast what we can actually spend in a year. In the past, the utility had budgeted as much as they could for all these capital improvements that never happened in the year they thought they were going to happen. And we have very ambitious engineers. So we've actually kind of had a reality check for our capital improvement program. Our future capital down the road is going to increase. We've got some substations to build in some of the newer areas of town, and our rehabilitation program is really growing because our system is aging, and we really need to make sure that it's rehabilitated so it doesn't fail. So on the next slide, and there's some people like graphs and some people don't. So this is a cash basis forecast of what are the money coming in and the money going out. So the black line is revenue, and as you can see, it's relatively flat. From 16 out through 20. It was a little bit higher in 15, and that's partly because we had a hydroelectric surcharge, and we don't forecast to have a hydroelectric surcharge. We forecast that we're not going to have that. So that's part of the reason that, probably the biggest part of the reason why that number is just pretty flat, and as you can see, it's slightly declining over time. The red line is our expenses. This is cash basis. Now remember I said we've actually kind of ratcheted down our capital spending. Well, what's happened is we had money budgeted in prior years that just carried over and not unspent. So in years, in 15 and 16, we're actually spending that money from the prior years on our capital improvement program. So we're not actually collecting from our ratepayers to pay those. We're taking a break kind of on budgeting for those projects, and we're using the money that has accumulated in the capital improvement program budget. But then that we'll catch up with that in 17, and then we'll see some our expenditures get a little bit more than our revenue. The thing that you don't see here is that after fiscal year 20, we expect to see fairly substantial large cost increases, and those are due to the state's greenhouse gas emission reduction requirements and how they're providing us with some allowances now to ease the rate impact on our customers. Those are slated to go away after 2020. So we don't show that here, but we expect some pretty significant operating cost increases after 2020. So the next slide shows our fiscal policies, our financial metrics that we track. We will be revisiting our financial policies this year. The last time we established these about 10 years ago. We updated them about 5 years ago. And so it's time for us to do a thorough review of our financial policies and our metrics. Our target for our rate stabilization fund, that's our reserves, is 40 to 90% of our operating costs. We're at 40%. I mentioned that earlier. We're at the minimum level, which is great because it's the first time we've been at that minimum level in quite some time. The debt service coverage ratio, that just represents how much money after we pay our bills do we have left over to pay our bondholders. We are above our target there. Days cash on hand is just a measurement. It's a financial metric for most companies, how much cash do you have on hand to cover operating costs. And we're above our target right now, and that's because of our growing reserves. And our credit rating is an A+, and I'd like to see our target actually be higher than that. So maybe we'll be revisiting that with the financial policies too. So our rate case, when we do a rate case every 2 years, and our revenue requirement is, as I mentioned, that our revenues are sufficient to meet our financial policies and our reserves levels and to meet our cash needs. And so based upon our rate case review this year, we do not need to raise revenues for the next 2 years. Our rates where they are today are good to cover our costs, and so we don't need to raise revenues. But, and this is not new, I've mentioned this on multiple occasions, our revenues don't align with our costs. And so what this graph shows you is the top left pie chart is our revenues. And so 86% of the money that comes in from our customers is based upon their consumption. So if you use more, you pay more. You're going to pay a higher rate per unit or pay per kilowatt hour that you use. If you use less, you're going to pay less. You're going to pay less per kilowatt hour. The challenge with that is, if you see in the bottom right-hand pie chart, is that our costs are more fixed. So only 60% of our costs are variable or energy related, and 40% of our costs are actually fixed. So no matter how much you use, 40% of what we need to charge you is fixed, regardless of how much you use. So what back 3 years ago, we set on a path to better align the revenues with the costs and what's fixed and what's not fixed. So higher users today are paying a disproportionate share of the system's fixed cost because we've loaded everything in the energy charge. We're not unique. every other utility in the state of electric utility in the state of California is doing the same thing, and we've done it because the state has and many cities and utilities have policies and priorities to get energy efficiency to be a big deal. We have a requirement that energy efficiency is our first energy source. Before we build a power plant, before we do anything, we have to look at energy efficiency. So that's how we operate. So it's not unusual that we've loaded these costs on these higher users, but what's happening is the higher users are subsidizing the lower users, and at the same time, solar customers are are subsidizing, and the higher users are subsidizing the solar users. And so given that we're going to have these new net zero energy homes in 2020, and what's happening with our revenue and our costs, in addition, there was a proposition passed back, I think 5 or so years ago, and Joe, please correct me if I'm wrong, because you're the attorney on this and not me, but they passed Proposition 26, which was somewhat related to Proposition 218 and Proposition 13. So Proposition 26 basically says that some municipalities were charging fees that were really taxes. And so because they believe that now, if you want to change a fee or you want to charge a fee, you now have to get a supermajority of your voters to vote in that fee because it's really a tax. At the same time, what the proposition says is that you can't charge somebody for something if they aren't using that product and it's not a reasonable cost for that service. And the opposite is true too. So you need to pay whatever it really costs to provide you that service. And so we don't have that right now. Now, nobody's rushing to fix that. A number of utilities are moving in this direction. SMUD is moving towards $20 fixed charge, I think, by 2017. I could be wrong on the year, but our fixed charge for residential customers right now is $18 a month. And as I mentioned, when we did our last rate case, our plan was to slowly increase the fixed charge and decrease the energy charge slowly. So what we're going to recommend this year is another 2-year rate case. Again, we're not going to raise any revenues, but it's a zero revenue change. But when you do that, some people's bills are going to go up and some are going to go down. So the changes that we're looking at is to increase the fixed charge from $18 to $22 next year in 2016, and then to $26 in 2017, with about a 5 to 6 year trajectory to get us to full cost of service rates. We're proposing to remove the third tier for residential customers, compacting the energy charges, and that's to get us ready for time of use rates in a few years. When you have time of use rates, you don't have tiers. You have prices based upon when you use the energy. We're also going to shorten the super peak. The super peak is the time of day where energy is the highest. You're going to pay the highest price for energy. We do have some time of use customers today, and they're all business customers. And we're going to actually shorten the peak by 1 hour because the current peak didn't truly reflect our costs. And so we're going to make it more reflective of the costs. And we're also going to, we have a standby rate, which only impacts one customer, and it's really about, they have some of their own generation, but we have to provide standby power for them in case their generation goes down. We're going to adjust that to make it more cost-based, again, slowly getting to a cost-based rate there. Slightly decrease the greenhouse gas emission adder and the renewable adder because those costs are coming in slightly below where we're expecting them to be a little bit below where they are right now. And we're actually we have 2 city-owned electric vehicle chargers. One's here in the parking garage here, and there's another one at the mall. We're going to start charging for energy there. Right now you can plug in for free because we got grant money to upgrade those chargers, and we've been using them for research and development. But now it's time to start charging people for the electricity that they use at those 2 stations. So tentatively, and this isn't that tentative, it's pretty firmed up right now, we're starting community outreach in August, early August. We plan to come back to you in the fall. We're targeting September, but it may be October. depending on what happens with the outreach. Then we would go, obviously, with the rate proposal and your recommendation to the city council after that. And then the plan is to have implementation in January 2016. Now, I mentioned that this is tentative because depending on what we get from the outreach and what we hear from the community, we may do more outreach. We may decide to, we may have to do some things that change our schedule a little bit. If this slips to February, it's not going to matter because we're not looking to raise revenue. We're just looking to change the structure of the rates a little bit more. So the next few slides, and I don't know that I need to go over these in detail, but just show kind of where we expect to be. If we could go to the next slide. Oh, maybe we don't have any, maybe. Oh, you know what? I don't think they included them in the packet. Never mind. Anyway, what this will do is this will just keep our revenues and our costs aligned over the next 2 years. So with that, I would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Michelle. Commissioners, do you have any questions, starting on my left?
Michelle, could you talk a little bit more about the outreach? What do you have planned and where will you go?
We are meeting with the Roseville Chamber of Commerce. We are going to be meeting with Sun City's Government Affairs, I can't remember if it's Government Affairs or Government Relations Committee. We're going to be meeting with a number of Arcona groups. We're going to do at least 2 community meetings on different parts of town. We usually do the east and the west. And we also meet individually with our largest customers. And am I missing anything? No. And then again, based upon what we hear from folks, we can expand our outreach.
Okay. And you'll publish that schedule of outreach? Or?
Yes, we would be publishing it. It'll be on our website. We are actually, the September newsletter that comes to customers, it'll be in there. So we'll have the information. We'll actually publish the information in the Press Tribune. We publish the public meetings, dates and times that we're going to be there.
Great, thanks.
Jim, any questions? No? How on my right? John, Landon, Gretchen? All right, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it, Michelle.
Thank you, Michelle.